welcome to Step Into My Office, Commercial Property Executives podcast series that tackles all things office and flex office related. Join me and industry experts in the field as we take some trips across major markets and delve into investment strategies and opportunities in the sector. I'm Olivia Bunescu, Senior Associate Editor, and as we honor powerful women in CRE during Women's History Month, I'm joined by Laura Kozelouzek, CEO and founder of Quest Workspaces. With over 30 years of experience in hospitality and the flexible workspace sectors, Laura has built Quest across 14 locations in Florida and New York, now serving over 1,000 clients. In this episode, we delve into her experience in the field and the lessons learned along the way, the principles she follows when scaling a business, as well as Miami's co-working dynamics. Thank you very much, Laura. I'd like to discuss a bit about your journey and Quest Workspaces.
Fantastic. I can't wait to talk about that.
You founded Quest Workspaces in 2010. What inspired your decision and what problem were you trying to solve back then?
I had been in the flexible workspace industry since the early 1990s, if you could imagine, because most people don't even realize that there was flexible workspace back then. It was called different things at different times, from executive suites to business centers before it was actually called co-working or even flexible space. But so I had left the hospitality industry. I studied hospitality at Cornell, and I'd worked in the hotel industry in New York City. I owned a restaurant in New York City. So I kind of grew up in the hospitality field. I was actually recruited working in the hotel industry in the early 90s to go work for a flexible workspace company. So for me, a little bit different. I think a lot of people are bringing hospitality to this industry now. For me, that's all I knew. So back in the early 90s, for me, it was all about hospitality in the office space sector. And that was always the way I envisioned it. And that's always the way I led my career. And so I always believe an office should be focused on, the people and the service piece of it, not just the functionality in the space. I, started my journey in my career working for other companies. I was part of a roll-up of a bunch of individual operations, in like around 2000, 1999. And I had seen where operators they didn't see it the same way I saw it. They saw real estate really as leases, and you put people in place, they sign a 10-year lease, and then you worry about them when the time came for renewal. And for me, it was always different. So I was always trying to bring more to the business and the industry. And so I left and started my own companies, and Quest Workspaces was actually my second co-working company. The first one I had partnered with a real estate group. And in my journey, this was my sort of baby, in the sense that I got to create it exactly the way I wanted it. It was Quest Workspaces, and the tagline is freedom to work the way you want. And for me, it was really about me, creating freedom for myself, but also for everybody that worked within the company and all of our clients. I think, if you had, that's sort of the background. But if you say, what problem was I trying to solve? I felt like the culture, I couldn't find a company that had the kind of culture that I wanted to work in. So I had to build it myself. So I guess that was the problem I was solving for, or the opportunity I saw.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And you owned a restaurant? That's great.
I did. I owned a restaurant in New York City, of all places. And it was an amazing experience. I was in my early 20s when I was there was three of us, there's three partners. And I thought I knew what I was doing. There's a lot that I needed to learn, as you can imagine. It was a 100-seat restaurant on the Upper West Side in New York City. And I think the thing that I learned most about is that it was in New York City at that point in time, it was difficult to get people to really care about their jobs, because most of them wanted to be actors and actresses. And, for me, it meant everything. I wanted to create this amazing experience. And it was hard getting other team members on board. So when I went into the flexible workspace and co-working industry, it was much different because I could hire people that were looking to make this their career. So it was a lot easier. It was a lot, I found it much easier because I had people that were invested in it, but it was a wild ride. It was very interesting. I learned a lot.
Um, I have a curiosity before we get into the next question. I read on the website that you have dedicated a space to Barbie.
Oh, we did. Well, that Barbie was kind of popular when the movie came out. We still don't have a Barbie office at the moment, but we had some fun with that. That's one of the benefits of having your own company without investors, without partners, and you can kind of, if something seems like it's a fun, interesting, cool idea, then you could just kind of run with it. So we do that often. So it was just a fun theme thing that we did in our Miami office. And it just, I guess it kind of, it's funny. The culture quest is very much about offering high-end professional office space, right? And we attract companies that are looking to do serious work in that space. But at the same time, we're all humans and we like to enjoy ourselves and have a good time and have fun. So I think one of the things that Quest does really good is we balance those two in terms of the culture that we create for not just our team members, but even all of our clients. So this was a fun way we had a pink, basically had a pink office where everything was pink and everything was Barbie-ish. And, we had a bunch of influencers that had fun posting about it. The clients enjoyed it. They could rent it for the day and work out of that space. And, we want the spaces to be fun and inspirational. And so yeah, that was a good example of that.
Mm-hmm. What were some early assumptions that turned out to be wrong about your career in commercial real estate and the flexible workspace sector?
Yeah, I think I was kind of surprised now this is many, many years ago. This is literally 3 decades ago. When I first entered the industry, I was surprised that it was such a new industry, right? It didn't have the same level of, let's just say, sophistication, and it hadn't evolved to obviously the level of what hospitality and lodging and the hotel industry, which is where I came from. So I was surprised where it was. And I think equally, I'm so glad that I stayed in this industry for all these years because I had a front row seat and actually an impact on the evolution of how the workspace has changed. And, to see where it is today from where it was like in the early 90s. And then, from having experiences of being, working for a startup in the industry to then, raising funds and then rolling up the industry to then doing mergers and acquisitions in the industry to then starting my own management company in the business and then, a partnership with a big real estate group and now Quest Workspaces, which is really, it's like, it's a serious company, but it's also like a passion project for me as well. Like the fact that I can be so passionate about it at this point, I think that's the part that is so exciting for me now is to see where the industry is. And what I had always hoped it would be this when I had entered it 30 years ago, so now fast forward to see the interest level, the how it's evolved into different niches. And, now I feel like everyone's speaking my language, which is, the fact that it's more relational, not just transactional. So it's very exciting for me.
Quest is described as the largest woman-owned shared workspace company in the US. How has being woman-owned shaped the decisions, opportunities, or obstacles in the commercial real estate space throughout the years?
Yeah, I think first off, when we're labeled as the largest woman owned, it's like a double-edged sword. I'm proud of that, but at the same token, I feel like there's a lot of work that needs to be done, because let's face it, we are a really premium, successful company in the industry. But at the same time, there should be more women-owned co-working companies and of larger scale too, quite frankly. Like when I started Quest, it was never about, trying to be the largest. It was about trying to be the best at what we were doing. So that's what really drove me. I think that, historically, those of us that have been in the industry for quite some time, it's always been that a lot of the people working in the industry were women. and the people that typically own the companies were men, and it was just always like that. So I I love that we're a woman-owned company. I think women clients love that because they feel like, there's they they feel supported for whatever reason. I don't see myself, I see myself as like a business person, but I think that I think it sets an example for women, and they like the story in terms of how I was able to get to where I got. And I think that, women oftentimes tend to base more of their business out on relationships versus necessarily, transactions. So I think it works
Mm-hmm.
well in our industry when, I think that's become a big part of our culture, is to be more about collaboration and, working together, building strong relationships. And I think that's one of the reasons we've been really successful, is because of that. And it's sort of like, going after that win-win solution, versus, just the win. So yeah, so that's what my experience. I don't look at it as, I don't see, I see myself as a strong leader,
Mm-hmm.
and I see
That.
Quest as a strong company, regardless of our gender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's one leadership lesson you learned the hard way that you now teach your team because it changes careers?
I think that the with leadership, clearly charisma is very important, and people want to work with people that they enjoy, that they like, that they respect, that they can balance, enjoying themselves, care, growth, hitting results, and so on. And I think that for Quest, like, we have a lot of charismatic leaders for sure. And I think that, as we are evolving, I think that you've got to balance charisma with clarity about, how things are to work, and and set up process, and so on. I think that, as a company, at a leadership level now, we're going to 16 years. We are super entrepreneurial. We've got a lot of passion, a lot of energy, and that has really made us very successful. But I think, it's almost like, the baby growing up, right? Like, it's, they talk about companies going through different stages, and, then they become the toddler, and then they're the rambunctious teenager, and then they go into like young adulthood. And I feel like Quest has been moving through those stages. And, now we're larger. We have 50 employees, and we're the largest regional operator in South Florida. And, we have like 2,000 clients. And so we're a lot, I wouldn't say the largest company, but we're a decent sized company. And now it's becoming, it's we can't, as leaders, always handhold and touch everyone along the journey as much as because we're growing, but we don't want to lose a lot of the things that have made us, successful. So I think is balancing the process piece of it, and being really clear about how we can be consistent in the delivery and the service, and keeping the culture.
What was the most pivotal make or break moment in scaling Quest from a founder led business to a multi location operator?
I feel like the entire process.
Mhm.
I don't even know.
Well,
I'm not sure I can ever, maybe that's like a founder, this is just a normal way founders feel. I don't know, I guess because, the story about how Quest got started was that I, during the recession in 2010, I literally took $50,000 of my savings and started our first location here in Miami. And that's all I had for deposit. And luckily, our landlord, I told them that, they said, Laura, the biggest banks don't leave a deposit that little. And I said, well, for a biggest bank in the world, $50,000 is not a lot of money. For me, it's everything. I said, so it will not fail. And, you have my word. And that's literally how I got Quest started. And from that point forward, it was like I had no choice. We had to be successful. There was no safety net. I wasn't raising any money. I wasn't bringing in any partners. And so when you say, like, what were the make or break moments, like literally every single month to make sure that I could pay the rent. And that's how the company got started. And it was, just really good, very strong. It was like a very strong foundation because, we had to make really good decisions, everything. Every real estate deal we did, whenever we decided to expand, every time we would kind of get on solid, felt like we were on solid footing, we'd go and add another location. And we had no choice but to be profitable in every location that we opened from day one. And we were, and we still are. Like it was pretty amazing. So I think that when you say make or break, I think it was probably like 3 years in where I was like, okay, I think we're pretty solid, right? And then of course, things happen, COVID happens, and you're like, you're in triage mode, and you go into that mode of like, okay, we got to do what we have to do to get through this. And so I feel, from maybe that's just my personality, but I feel like every year is that, even if we're, now we've been at this for 16 years, we've got a really strong, solid business. But at the same token, it's like, if I see a shift in a market or something, like then it becomes make or break. Like it's not an option. Like I kind of tackle everything like that.
Mm-hmm. And so now Quest has 14 locations in Florida and Manhattan. So
Correct.
what are the things that stayed consistent throughout this growth? And where is there something that had to change completely from a business perspective?
Yeah. So I'll start with the thing that's changing, because it kind of segues from the other question that you asked. I think when as you're scaling, and you want to maintain, you need to maintain good, solid, strong operating principles, and also not lose all of the great, wonderful things that got you to where you were. You have to start operating the business off of more data and process, versus kind of a very kind of shoot from the hip style. So that has been something that we've been focused on, to make sure that we can continue to grow and not things don't break down, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
process. Um, and that you're not constantly rebuilding, so that is the thing that we're focused on changing so that we can continue to grow successfully. The things that don't change, like that is easy and fun to answer, because it's everything that we did really well from the beginning, and
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that I refuse to allow to slip, because I've seen it happen too many times in the companies that I've worked for, and where a company can kind of lose its soul, it loses its that entrepreneurial spirit that made the company successful, that recruited top people, that really made a difference. So, we use the term relentless hospitality, and like I am relentless about the hospitality piece of it, and making sure that we put the clients first, and because I think one of the biggest benefits that we have at the size that we're at is that we can still, we have structure, clearly, otherwise there'd be chaos. But, if a client says they need something that's really outlandish, rather than just saying no, which in many cases that's what happens in a lot of companies, because you have to fit into a lane. We say, okay, and everyone's trained not to say no. Say, okay, let me understand it. Let's try to figure out a way to make it work. So I am super proud of that. And, I think that's because I still get so excited when I see how we can help people grow and businesses grow. And I want to be a part of it all. I don't want to say no to any company or any person that's trying to like live that journey. That's the thing that can change. And I think it starts from the top, and you have to empower everybody to have that attitude. And sometimes it involves breaking some rules or bending rules, or you put the rules in place to have, like I said, to have good systems. But sometimes it makes sense to work with it, to work outside of those boundaries to create the right solutions for people.
Would you say there are any principles from a business perspective that you refuse to compromise on?
Bad decisions. I mean, I think that's the best way to generalize it. Like, I think that's the first thing that comes to mind when I say bad decisions. That just because you've always done it a certain way, like I'm constantly, um, I'm constantly reevaluating how we're doing things, and if it still makes sense, and if there's a better way to do it. It could be in how the business is operating, it could be in how the business is marketed, it could be how we're delivering service, it could be how we're recruiting top people, it could be, what do our clients really need today that's different than what they needed 3 or 4 years ago. So maybe it's not bad decisions, maybe it's about adaptability,
Mhm.
is staying adaptable, based on that's probably bad. I think not being adaptable leads to bad decisions. So I think it starts with adaptability first.
Yeah, right. I'd like to talk a bit about your presence in Miami and South Florida. What's unique about this co-working markets that people might misunderstand?
Let me first say this is that in my career, I've worked in like every market across the US. And I think certain things are not any different. Like, I think humans are humans, people are people. I think that, you know, people may say, oh, New Yorkers are a little more direct,
Mhm.
than other parts of the country. You could say things like that. But at the end of the day, like people want to be treated special and cared for and know that they're important and know that they belong to something that is unique, right? And I think that's, we start with that period. Like, I think that's the similarity. When you talk about like let me rephrase that. That's more about the service delivery and what we like. That's something that's not compromised no matter, where we might be operating. I think that even in South Florida, market to market is different, and I think you need to kind of, you have to understand your audience and what's important to them. And it's West Palm is very different than Miami to, Broward and even Doral. So I think there's then, there's like those non-negotiables, that in terms of how we deliver the service. And then I think you have to know your audience, right? And some centers may attract a certain industry, or some markets attract, more financial and law, professional services versus a little more creative. So we really pay attention to that, and we offer things that we think clients will need based on that. And I think that's more of an art than a science. Like, we use the data, but then we listen to our clients. So I think that's in terms of the service delivery. As far as the market, in terms of the real estate market, I think for me, it's been so interesting because I've been working in New York. Like, I'll use it compared to New York, right? Like, New York, a very established, one of the greatest cities in the world, has always been. And I started my career in New York City. And I've always, for me in my 20s, which was a long time ago, I used to come to Florida. I used to love working in Florida because it was like I felt like I was on vacation and I was in a resort, and it's this beautiful place to live. And but at the same time, I was like, these people aren't quite as serious as the New Yorkers, right? And I think that has shifted tremendously, over the last, I'll say decade. You could say since COVID, but and I just did a story with BizNow about this, about, billionaires being attracted to South Florida and why are they coming, and, what that means for businesses and what that means for offices. And, I think that the thing that South Florida has, besides like the multicultural, now they've got an incredible base. I'm looking out the window because I'm actually looking at the Miami skyline right now as I'm talking to you. And I'm like, I'm envisioning this and the incredible growth that I've seen over the last, 10 years or even the last 5 years. And, I think that there's so many potential draws that bring companies here, especially the fact, in terms of the tax incentives, it's very friendly for business to be done here. The state has done a lot to entice people to come. But then on top of it, when you combine it in such a beautiful place to live, and I think more than ever, people are looking for lifestyle, in terms of, their professional and their work life, especially since COVID. Everyone's like, I want to work from home. I want to have more balance in my life, which is, I think, a good thing. For me, I look at Miami now and it's like, gosh, I go out on the boat and I look at the skyline and I'm like, oh my gosh, there aren't many places in the US where you can combine an amazing life outside of work with now everything that's happening with all these amazing companies coming to Miami and all South Florida, all the way up to West Palm and Tampa, you name it. We're experiencing this in all of our markets. I think the market is just going to continue to grow. I think it's thrive. Yeah, it's an exciting place for me to be because, you know, um, we have a real foothold in South Florida, and so we're in an exciting place in a very exciting industry at the same time. I'm this. It's. I think we're in a great position. And then when you combine that with what's, the advances in technology and AI and being able to do, in my opinion, enhance both the operations and, the hospitality portion of what we do. it's just gonna keep getting more and more exciting.
Mhm. And are there any challenges you're identifying in the market? And if there are any challenges, how are you addressing those right now?
I think some of the challenges are operators chasing growth without sustainable business models, and coming into markets and not really having a plan. It could be disruptive. I feel like, it's for Quest, our our focus has always been very disciplined growth and, sticking to the fundamentals and making sure that we can continue to deliver, a real premium experience, in every location that we're in, and make good solid business decisions around that. And I think that that's one of the things that's a little bit can disrupt things for a bit. But beyond that, I think to my point before is just being really adaptable to how people are working and how that's changing, and keeping a pulse on that, because it's happening so quickly. I feel like things are evolving so quickly, and so you really have to stay on top of it and pay attention to it. So that's really where our focus is, so that we can keep evolving.
So you mentioned premium space. What does premium mean in the Miami co-working scene, and how has that definition changed, for example, since COVID times?
Yeah, I'll go back even further. Like, I think way back when, premium space was just, you basically had a location in a good building, a Class A building, and you had some good coffee and nice furniture.
Mm-hmm.
And that was considered, it was pretty boring, I would say. That was, I'm talking about, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I think you mentioned COVID. I think coming out of COVID, I think now more than ever, because people got a taste of working remotely, it fast tracked that. I don't think it would have happened without COVID. Companies allowing the remote work like they did, they had no choice. And now, for people to actually go to an office, especially when they have choice, it has to be a place that they want to go. Otherwise, they'd rather not commute. So I think more than ever, and it's interesting though, because for us, Olivia, for co-working operators, like we were always really we were dialed into that, because we weren't leading companies where we told the employees, you got to come to work or else. We have to attract people to say, come work at our spaces, because it's this is amazing space, and we're going to help you be more productive and be more inspired. And your employers are going to want to come work for you because you've got these amazing facilities and incredible amenities and so on and so forth. I think it just amplified that, and I think that it's so interesting and cool to watch all the different ways co-working and flex suite operators are experimenting with that in terms of what people want. And now it's even more interesting too, because now, I never thought this would happen, but like landlords and owners, they're like, they're all these terms, activating their spaces, and they're amenitizing their spaces. And, and it's amazing, because to me, these like office buildings are now getting transformed into like hotels. It's almost like they're following the same suit. Like they have inspiring lobbies, and, they actually they're not so sterile, you know what I mean? So they have personality. And so we're very, very aware of that. We've always been aware of it, but it's happening even more so. And so people want, and for us, I think, at the same time, you have to know what you, as a flexible office operator, what you're good at. Like, what, you can't be everything to everybody. You have to know your niche and do it really, really well. And for us, we have common spaces that are absolutely amazing and beautiful, but a good majority of our spaces are set up for private work. And that's the type of clients that we attract. But like I said earlier, you need to know who your client base is. And hedge funds and law firms and such, they need to have private secure spaces. So that's considered premium. Having, like I said, that combination of amazing even with the popularity of AI, all of our front desks are staffed with people that greet people, like for that, because that's very important to our client base. Like, They want to see a person that's going to be able to help them set up the meeting, order catering, create that first impression that's really important. And that to me is very premium. So
Mhm.
so that's where you have to know, what is it that you deliver and do really well. So for that, and then also, our events are very curated, and it's a lot of personal connections, versus just pour some beer and they will come. It's a little different. We try to offer a more elevated experience with that as well. And, it never ends. Like, we're always trying to think up new, whether it be wellness events or you name it. Like, it runs the gamut, from food related to fun to wellness to educational to, any ways for people to connect. So
You mentioned briefly earlier that there are certain differences even within the same city. So, regarding the tenants and what they want from those spaces. So, in Miami, you have multiple locations in Brickell and downtown. Are there any
correct.
differences that you see between what members want in those spaces, and maybe if you can get into your current tenant mix at those spaces?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not that, you know, uh, that there's members or our clients in these spaces that, then say they want different things. I think in a market, depending upon the real estate market, that's going to drive different decisions, right? In terms of who's going to occupy the space. So, for example, Brickell has always been like the premier, the like Park Avenue, if you will, of like New York City, in terms of, everyone identifies Brickell Avenue as, the financial center, this, sort of the center of the CBD market. So, for many years, Brickell's always had the highest draw in terms of demand, right? And most of the development of all the condominiums and everything was, in terms of where people lived, was near Brickell, right? So that's always been sort of there, for as long as I can remember. And then, of course, Miami starts growing. And, all these other submarkets within Miami get created, right? And so focusing on, like you said, on downtown. So downtown was always a place that was less expensive, in terms of the real estate cost, and which means that, we can offer better deals to our clients in downtown. And it tended to attract larger firms, larger, law firms and such. But there were never that many services around the downtown area. Like, it was just, there's way more in Brickell. And I think that's where most people want to be in Brickell. Well, now downtown's going through a massive transformation. And you have the creation of World Center, which is like some of the highest end real estate in terms of homes. And, within a few on the north side, you have Brickell, then downtown, and then you've got World Center that's being created. And then the Bright Line train station, which is connected to every city all the way up the coast of Florida. And, so they've got a massive transportation hub, and all these things are starting to happen. And it's becoming like a little live, work, and play area as well in downtown. So downtown is transforming. It's still a work in progress. And it's, I feel like I literally blinked and World Center was created, and now everything is sort of filling in between World Center, downtown, and Brickell. And coming from New York, I spent so many years in New York and my career in New York City. And I look at downtown and I think downtown is going to ultimately have the same level of appeal as Brickell, if not more so, because it's all
Mhm.
getting built. It's kind of being built from scratch. And so, yeah, so it's very exciting. And, but I will say right now, the biggest draw for somebody going to down, what's happened is the pricing for real estate on Brickell Avenue has doubled and in some case tripled, in some of the buildings since COVID, like in a very short period of time. So a lot of tenants' leases are coming up for renewal and they're getting massive sticker shock. So imagine their rent costs doubling. So they're getting priced out of the Brickell market. So, we have a lot of people considering downtown. And, so for example, like our downtown locations are on the 38th and 31st floor with like ocean views and they're amazing, right? So even better views. So I can argue that the buildings have, in some cases, even better amenities and better perks than Brickell. So it'll be interesting to see how that shift continues to happen. So I hope does that give you a pretty good overview from the rest? Yeah,
Yeah,
good,
amazing
good, good, good.
overview considering that I have never been to Miami.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, hopefully I gave you a good description.
yeah, it was a very good description. I have one more question for you. What are some of your predictions for Miami's office market and co-working market, especially where the demand is headed in the next year? Are you building something now so you can be ready for the future?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned earlier, the great thing about Quest and the fact that we don't have investors that I have incredible pressure to grow for the sake of growing or anything like that. Like we can be very pragmatic and disciplined how we're growing. So, we tend to, take our time, like I said, and try to make really good decisions about where we decide to go and where we decide to add locations. I There are markets that we're considering, and at the moment, though, I'll be honest, like because everything is shifting and changing so much in terms of what's happening, with AI facilitating a lot of our operations. I've sort of taken a pause to really look at how the needs of our clients change, or how are they changing and shifting. how how are they using the space, which is also evolving, right? Like there's it's not, and companies, quite frankly, don't know what they need, so oftentimes they think they need something and then it turns out not to be that, and they less people come to the office or more people come to the office, or they use the office only a few times a day. So I'm sort of taking this as a time to kind of step back and reevaluate some of the things that we're doing and how we're doing and how are we offering our products and services, and are we meeting all the needs for all the solutions that we're offering. So that is, instead of like kind of a run and gun approach to just, build it, they'll come kind of an attitude, it's really about being really thoughtful about, how, what are we delivering? It doesn't make sense. How can we change that delivery? And then where do we go from there?
That's beautiful.
Stay tuned, Olivia.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for stepping into our office. Stay tuned for the next episode of our series and feel free to rate this one if you've enjoyed it. For more commercial news, trend stories, and podcast episodes, visit cpexecutive.com. Have a great day, and we can't wait to see you in our next episode.